All right, guys, welcome back to another Real Talk episode. Today, we're going to be talking about why magnification is king and why I believe it is a necessity for any GPR and higher magnification, specifically 1 to 6 being the minimum, but really 1 to 8, 1 to 10 is my opinion. But with that being said, I am just some random guy on the internet, so I want to keep this open forum. I only know as much as my own life experiences have allowed me to learn. I do shoot a lot, but there's a lot of guys out there who can add more context or add their own experiences in the comment section. So go ahead and let it ring. If you guys do want to support the channel, rangedaybro.com. We have a discounts page over there. We have a loadouts page for all of the loadouts we're going to be talking about today. Also, subscribe to the email list while you're over there. I send out deals with some of the best deals I could find on Brownells and other places throughout the internet. Follow me on Rumble, follow me on X, subscribe to the channel, obviously, and then lastly, follow me on Instagram, even though Zuckerberg, we'll see if it lasts with his walk back on content, what's the word, censorship, there it is. But with that being said, guys, also big shout out to the GOA. Make sure you're supporting pro-gun organizations that fight for our rights. This is a hat from them. If you donate $50, they send you a pretty cool Abolish ATF hat. So big shout out to those guys. No affiliation, I just like them. Now, getting into it, there's been a lot of discussion on my channel recently in the comment section, and I love it, talking about general purpose rifles, do-it-all rifles. There's really no such thing as a do-it-all, but talking about optics specifically with shorter barreled setups, 11.5s, 12.5s, and I say that because people, they see the shorter nature of these uppers that we're running recently, and they think, well, there's no reason that you should have a magnified optic on that setup, and especially not a 1 to 8 or 1 to 10, calling it overkill. And then another critique I get all the time is, why not go with a 2 to 10 if you're going to run a top dot anyways? So let's just talk about that a little bit here. So first and foremost, this isn't a GPR video, so to speak. It's more about magnification on a GPR. So I'll just touch on this really, really quickly. But if you've only ever shot at an indoor range, I can't really blame you for not knowing what it's like to have to shoot out at distances past 300 or 400 yards. And once you hit those 300, 400, 500 yard targets, you get wind is a big factor, especially out here in Central Texas. And so reticle is going to play a key role in that. I guess I'm just saying all this to remind myself of what I wanted to cover in this video. But unless you've done it and you've struggled and you've actually not done it, what I mean is, unless you've been out in the open shooting, trying to shoot to 400 or 500 yards with whatever barrel length, obviously it plays a bigger factor in the shorter ones, and had to hold off into open space using something like an ACOG, which we have right here, then you really don't know what the struggle is like. I'm not saying you can't think of it, figure it out, but if you've never experienced the frustration of holding out into open space, whether it be with a magnifier and dot combo or an ACOG or something that does not have a Christmas tree reticle and a higher top end, something that is more geared towards getting accurate shots on target at those distances, then you can't really relate. And so I'm not saying people are commenting don't have the experience, but a lot of times when you're hiding behind a fake username, you can say whatever you want because no one can actually back it up or call you out on it. So I say all this from my own experience. And again, I don't have, I'm not claiming to have any experience I don't have, but I shoot a lot of guns and I prefer to shoot to distance. It's my favorite thing to do. And a big thing we always forget about in the tactical, the 2A community is that, like, you have to have fun. Otherwise you're going to get burnt out. And so it's really important to do what you enjoy. And I really enjoy shooting steel at distance. And with that being said, not just any size steel plate, like not just a 4x4 steel plate at 500 yards. I'm talking about shooting reduced C zones at 500 yards and in, primarily because that's all me and my buddies have, are reduced C zone targets, or like 6 or 10 inch plates, because they tend to be way cheaper, lighter, easier to carry literally, physically, to different areas. And so that's what we're primarily shooting at. But it begs the point that the size of the target matters as well. And I guess we'll just jump in and dive into that. We'll put this ACOG down for now. But let's just start with that. First of all, one more disclaimer. Don't go out and take this as your sign to go spend $1,500 to $3,000 on an LPVO. Whatever you have is better than nothing for sure. Like if you have an ACOG, if you have a red dot magnifier, just understand the limitations, but also just know where I'm coming from and why I set my stuff up this way. It's because I like to shoot small targets at far distances. And with that being said, in the real world, in the field, if this ever were, and by the way, all these guns are set up for not a home defense, not when there's police and law enforcement and there's rule of law throughout the land. This is a Second Amendment purpose. So we're talking about fighting tyranny, foreign or domestic, guerrilla warfare, fighting a equal force to yourself. That's kind of what these things are set up for in that mind. So keep that in mind as we discuss this. But I don't know about you, I don't like to have holes in me that I didn't show up with. So if I'm out in the field and I'm in a gunfight, I'm gonna be as small as I can be of a target to the enemy. And the enemy is not dumb either. So I say all that to say, a lot of guys will go out, and me included in previous years, will take a Mark 18 and I'll sit down on a bench with a tripod, with a bag, and I'll go shoot a man-sized steel plate or a 2x2 steel plate at 500 yards, and I'll get like 5 shots out of 10 hits, and then I'll be like, okay, this gun is capable out to 500 yards. Now, we're not even going to get into the ballistic conversation. Modern ammunition is pretty great. Even if the ammunition doesn't reliably expand, it tumbles. It still does great damage on shorter barrels. That's not what this is about, though. This is mostly about getting the hits. And again, being in a real world scenario, you're not going to be shooting at full man-sized targets unless you're at a literal ambush, and that's going to last all of about for the first crack of the first shot, and then everyone's going to duck and hit cover. So hold yourself to a higher standard during training. Myself, like I said, it's pretty much mostly out of necessity. Like, it would look way better on video if I was shooting giant C-zone steels and just, rapid fire off my shoulder at 500 yards, right? Not that that is possible that easily, but it does make a huge difference when you're shooting giant C-zone steel that's like 16 inches across by 24 inches tall versus an 8-inch by 14-inch plate. That's a huge difference, right? So the size of the targets matters and how your training matters. And when you start to incorporate distance, wind, environmentals, and then the size of the target being reduced, like a more realistic scenario, or even if a guy is standing plating himself at you, you still have a vital zone within the human body. So I really like to reduce C zones for that reason, because even if I'm getting somebody's full frontal exposure, I'm still hitting within a vital zone of a fighting age male. But then that's before you even introduce the variable of shooting in obscure and improvised positions. So if you don't have a tripod to use, if you don't have a bipod in a bag, which most GPRs are not going to be, it's not going to be part of your GPR setup because your rifle is just going to weigh 30 pounds at that point, then not only does the distance and the wind and the factors of your equipment play in, but also what was I just talking about? This is, my brain is a special thing. Talking about improvised shooting positions, there it is. Usually, again, you're not going to have the ability to be completely prone, whether it's because of the just tall grass, whether it's because of logs down, whether you're in a city and there's curbs. Like, usually the prone position is an extremely rare position to get into, especially in a rapidly changing engagement environment. So a guy who I really like, go follow him, XMTG, James Ferguson over there. He's an ex-Mesquite SWAT team sniper instructor. He was an operational sniper for 24 years in SWAT team up there in Mesquite outside of Dallas. And he told me in his 24 years, I think he said he deployed in the prone like 3 or 4 times in his entire career. And most of his career was deploying in improvised shooting positions, and more recently with tripods. So tripods have become a huge assist. Modern tripods that are made for shooting have kind of changed the game as far as precision shooting goes. But even with that, for a GPR, you're not going to, just imagine you're not going to have your tripod, or you're not going to be able to get it out quickly enough to use it in a scenario like that. Again, if you're reacting, and most of what I'm playing out in my mind at least is defensive use of a GPR, because in any of these scenarios, you'd probably want to avoid the firefight if at all possible. But I say all that to say, if you never put yourself in those uncomfortable positions, in those less than ideal scenarios, then you wouldn't really understand. I'm not saying like, oh, you're too dumb to understand, but like, until you've done it and you've failed over and over, and you've just wasted magazine after magazine of accurized 77 grain OTMs to get frustrated enough to be like, screw this ACOG or screw this red dot magnifier. It's cool, but this really unlocks the capability with a 1-to-10 LPVO. And more specifically, a reticle that allows you to have a mill reticle with drops and wind holds as well is super important for me specifically. So it's 2025, etched reticles being what they are. There's no reason companies can't create a semi-usable etched reticle. Sorry about that, guys. My baby woke up, so I'm going to have to try to keep my voice down a little bit since I am watching her from home today. But I think I was somewhere around the reticle conversation. So let's just get back into that. So in 2025, I do have a slight astigmatism. Okay, didn't hear her. So having an etch reticle really helps for me to have that crispy line. Even though the EOTech, the holographic, doesn't kind of give you that same flower bloom that the red dots do, there's no reason companies can't develop or just at least ask the market if they would be interested in buying something. Like if Trijicon came out with an ACOG that had wind holds, that'd be awesome. But I would take it even a step further and say, I think it's, again, a necessity to have a 6, 8, or 10x because you can. And to address, for the main reason for that is, again, we were looking for very small targets that are trying to hide from you, that are camouflaged, like even just a steel plate that was previously painted orange that has been peppered up, makes for a pretty good camo in a shaded, wooded area, as we found out as I was trying to stretch out that ACOG to just 300 yards with like 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So pretty windy day, but just even seeing it with a 4X as crystal clear as that glass is, it's not the golden standard as it was 20, 30 years ago, because all these LPVOs have amazing glass now. Now let's tackle one of the biggest criticisms of the choice of an LPVO, which is why not go with an MPVO, a 2 to 10, 2.5 to 12, whatever, all the different options. I'm not really as familiar with the MPVO market as I am with the good LPVOs that are out there. But why not go with an MPVO? And my answer to that is, I don't know. I'm not an owner of any decent MPVOs. If you consider a 3 to 18 an MPVO, I would probably call, 18X I think is a pretty high top end, but then again, it just goes down that path again, that thought path of, well, if you're good, same thing with the barrel lengths. So if you're gonna go 1 to 10, why not just go 2 to 10? And then why not just go 3 to 18? And why not just go 4 to 20? It just keeps going further and further. And there's weight considerations, there's price considerations, there's durability considerations, but it's the same thing with the barrel length conversation. If you're gonna go from a 10.3 to 11.5, why not just go 12.5? And if you're gonna go 12.5, why not go 13.7? And so on and so forth. So I don't know, I don't have enough experience behind a good quality MPVO, or really any MPVO, if you consider an MPVO like a 2 to 10 or a 2 to 12, something like that. I don't have any time behind that stuff to be able to tell you that this is better, that's better. I haven't done a direct comparison from my experience, but I tell you why I like an LPVO. It's because you do have the ability to have a great top end of 10x. Yeah, it's a little tight, but on the good ones like the Attacker, which that's kind of crazy as far as how expensive, the Attacker's crazy expensive, but it's, again, crazy durable. You're just buying the tank that the Night Force offers in the Attacker, but the Voodoo is a great option for the money. There's a ton of great options for the money, but again, we're not talking durability. I don't durability test my stuff. I don't drop them on concrete just to see if they'll break. So I don't want to speak to that either, but from my experience, pretty hard use with the EOTech 1 to 10, relatively good price point. They have great reticle options. It has a pretty good 1X. It is not daylight bright, so that's one of the biggest downfalls of this optic, but I love the reticle options that they have. It's very good for precise shooting out the distance. I had this previously on some larger frame AR, some AR-10s, and I was able to successfully shoot out to 700 yards. Actually, I shot 700 yards with this 1 to 10 EOTech on my HK MR556, which is like my current SPR, which is sporting a 3.6 to 18 Leupold Mark V right now. But again, I say all that to say, like, well, why not go with an MPVO? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's the better option of the two. I typically do use my top dot for, just if I'm being honest, I typically use my top dot for my 1X performance, but that's just because, I don't know, actually. I've been doing that recently. I do prefer a little bit of an offset, but offsets have their own downfalls. This is great for passive aiming, which is primarily the reason I put it up here, but I do find myself just cheating up into this dot right here for my 1X instead of using the LPVO, which I know, again, defeats the purpose and further justifies the person commenting about the MPVOs. But personally, if it's not daylight bright illumination, it's a little hard for me. It gets a little wonky, even though it has a great 1X. If you're shooting anywhere past like 7 to 10 yards, to use the 1X with both eyes open and get fast, accurate hits on LPVO. That's just me personally. And again, just depending on the training you're doing, what kind of standards you're holding yourself to as far as accuracy goes, the list goes on and on. But yeah, LPVOs are great, and I think more so magnification is king. I would say if you're if you're inclined, if you like LPVOs, if you have the budget, but to buy a 2 to 10 Mark V, which has side parallax, right? That's one of the big advantages of going with an LPVO over an LPVO is a parallax adjustment. But if you're going with that, you're spending a lot of money on, I think they're like from $2,000 to $2,600 on Brownells right now. But when you're approaching those prices, then you're approaching the Attacker price point, which does have daylight bright illumination. And I know there's other options. I'm just talking about what I have experience with. Brass was talking about how much he loves the PLXC. I've never shot through one of those. I have looked through them at a gun store. I've never actually put hours and time behind the glass to be able to speak to it on any kind of level that I would feel comfortable recommending or not recommending it. But it does intrigue me that Brass likes it so much because he is a very objective reviewer, and the fact that he's very high up on the PLXC, and he's talking about being very excited about the red dot bright version, the RDB version, no affiliation, but that is something I'll probably will have to check out based off of just the feedback of what I'm hearing. It sounds like something I would like to explore because I do love magnification. So I think we talked about like actually hitting things, having a good reticle with wind holds. Both of these optics have good wind holds in them. The Trijicon Credo that I have on the 11.5 here, if you'll bear with me as I go past the OSW here, which is a pretty awesome little FAL that I'm very excited to review. This is one of the few guns that I've recently gotten very excited to review because you get a little jaded when you're in this position, but very excited about this thing. It is featuring the TA11 3.5 power ACOG on here. I do, again, wish that all these ACOGs had better reticle options, in my opinion. I know it's a combat optic, but I thought the point of combat was hitting what you're shooting at. But I get it. I get the simplicity and the durability and the lightweight nature of them. So in the field of view, light gathering, no batteries, I understand why ACOGs have been so popular. But here's the Trijicon Credo. Again, I'm not a Trijicon hater. I like Trijicon stuff, but this is the old version that just has the mill reticle. Again, not daylight bright whatsoever, but it has green and red illumination, which is kind of cool. So you can pick your option. It has locking turrets, side elevation, and windage. This guy just has a locking elevation and a capped windage, which is honestly how I would prefer it because I'm never dialing for wind. But with that being said, this does not have wind holds. So the lack of wind holds in this reticle, if the wind is very windy that day and I'm shooting it on 11.5, which, the shorter the barrel, the less velocity, the more the bullet is affected by the wind, then it just, even on the 12.5, it's kind of almost apples to apples here because they're both being affected by the wind. I don't have a statistic for you to kind of make a claim on the difference, but the velocity difference between these two is like 60 feet per second, so you guys know. But again, this guy is a little bit harder to get those hits, even though I have that high top end magnification range. Unless I'm dialing for my elevation, and then I'm going to hold off on my horizontal line where it has all the stadia, then I have no reference point out in the open, and you're not going to be dialing again in a situation where you're going to need to quickly engage a target at distance. You're not going to dial. That's the point of a Christmas tree type reticle. And again, another huge complaint I hear about with the Christmas tree style reticles is they're too busy. They're too busy, it takes up too much of your field of view. It's like, dude, these modern etched reticles, you can watch a movie through them. They're not super thick lines, they're very fine points, and they almost disappear. If you're looking through them, you could look right through them at whatever you're observing. Not to mention the whole top of the scope is wide open for your observation purposes anyways. But that's where I'm kind of at, guys. I mean, I get it, and I only know what I know from my own experiences, but I do know that if you don't go out and actually put yourself in a position to challenge yourself, when you're not proned out, when you're shooting at smaller targets, when you're shooting to longer ranges, that's when those little differences in a 4x ACOG without wind holds and a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 8 with wind holds like the Attacker, and there's, again, a ton of them out there. I'm not saying you need to go out and buy any particular scope, but if you don't do that, then obviously it may not seem like a priority to you. But if you're setting this up for a general purpose, if you're setting it up to have as many tricks up its sleeve, so to speak, as it can, which is what I try to do with my setups, because you never know what you're going to encounter. Even on a perfect case scenario, offensive mission, you got a group of guys, you have a mission set, you're going to go execute. There's still transportation, there's still a lot that can happen between point A, execution, and returning to point A. And also, things go awry all the time. So it's really nice to have the capabilities of good glass to be able to get you out to different ranges and still maintain a shorter balanced package here with the same magazine ammo compatibility as the rest of your team. It's just the downsides are so small comparatively to the upside. And again, if you factor in the total package, 12.5, relatively lightweight can. This is the Energetic Armament Ferox. It's actually a 6mm can, but it's called the Ferox 5.56. Relatively lightweight can. It's about 12.5 ounces, directly threaded to the gun. Has a light. I usually have a laser on here as well. It's just on another gun for a different review. And so, yeah, these things get heavy, but on a shorter platform where you're not running a bipod, the advantages, again, I think far outweigh the disadvantages of it. The 1X is okay. I have this on a 1.7 Badger mount, so I really like these because you're not really having to scrunch your head way down into the gun. You can still remain relatively heads-up shooting position, but then the top dot does get a little bit higher and you lose your chin weld. So that's the reason Brass doesn't like to do top dot primarily for the 1X. He still aims through his main optic. I don't know what his optic mount height is, but that's something to consider. And I just need to get back to training to going into my optic for the 1X just to see what I like, because I really don't know 100%. And it's this quick to just change your magnification ring. Admittedly, I'll admit, I typically just run it at the top end, and then I just run the top dot. And again, that's an argument for a second focal plane versus a first focal plane, because you don't really, if you're running a 1:6 especially, you can just keep it at 6x. All your holds are going to be consistent with that top end magnification. With a second focal plane, they're usually cheaper, they usually have better clarity, and so on and so forth, because they don't have to make sacrifices within the optic to create a first focal plane reticle. So there's benefits to all of them, but it's just understanding what you want to accomplish, and then put yourself in those uncomfortable situations where you're not just doing what you know you're already good at and trying something new and trying to find ways that you can improve. That's kind of where I'm at, but also just have fun. That's the biggest thing, is like have fun. The reason I primarily have this setup is because I love shooting at distance. Even a 5.56 shorty like this guy, I have made accurate hits out past 500 yards consistently with a good optic, typically proned out past 500, but even 400, 450 and in off of just a sandbag. Really, sandbags are kind of essential. I'll say that. Sandbags really help. But yeah, I don't know. You guys let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I am a magnification whore, so I will take as much magnification as I can fit into a package. And so to me, it's like, I don't know if Loophole, or I don't know, Trijicon I think has a 2-12, or I think it might be 2.5-10 actually as well. There's a bunch of options out there, but glass is just one of those really expensive products that, for good glass, you pay usually a lot of money. And so I'm like, why don't I just train more with what I have? And, maybe one day I can get into LPVOs, try those out on a GPR and see how I like them. I just don't know what I don't know. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Again, if you're really trying to push yourself in your training and make it as realistic as possible, maybe try a smaller steel target, maybe try shooting off of obscure positions and see how much it helps. There is a downside to a top end magnification, obviously. You're not going to have as much field of view to spot your impacts or misses. Another thing that I realized through training at my buddy's ranch is that there's no backstop behind our 455 target. So if you can't spot your trace, you really can't spot your misses unless you're knocking down branches behind it. So in real life, that's a more realistic scenario. No one's gonna be standing in front of a berm when you're shooting at them. Maybe in front of a hill, but even grassy hills don't show splash like a berm does, kicking up dust and the wind blows it, and you can see it very clearly. So just things to consider as far as like, okay, what are we really training for? And then ask yourself, what is going to give me the best capability, even if the majority of my engagements are 300 yards and in, and typically a red dot magnifier or an ACOG would be plenty for that said situation. I don't think that the downsides are large enough to cause me to change my perspective. And I'm open-minded. I will change my perspective if I learn something. If I go to a course or I go to a competition and I learn something about myself or my gear, I'm not ashamed to say, hey, I was wrong. And mostly I am wrong. I've been wrong many times before. I'll be wrong many more times in the future. But I'm just giving you guys my inner monologue, talking through kind of my mindset, my process for why I set up my GPR, my do-it-all, my grab-and-go gun, dare I say main squeeze rifle, to the standard that I have, but that's pretty much the reason. Maybe in the future, I'll bump this down to a 1.5 so I can use my top dot more reliably with like a cheek riser or something like that. But for now, I'm just gonna keep training with what I got, and that's the most important thing, is just train with what you have, understand your own downfalls, the weaknesses of your setup, and just be honest with yourself about whether or not that's acceptable to you for what you want to accomplish with said setup. So anyways, that's pretty much going to be it, guys. rangedaybro.com if you want to support the channel. Discounts page, loadouts page. Make sure you subscribe to the email list over there. Also, follow me on Rumble, follow me on X, on Instagram. Subscribe, like. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And support the GOA. Shout out to Hop for coming on the channel, or Brass Facts rather. I'm trying to get Hop on soon. A little foreshadowing there. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today. Love you guys. Thank you so much for your time. Talk to you soon.